May 11th, 1864. Constant skirmishing going on in our front, and both armies are evidently preparing for another death grapple. Shot and shell are constantly passing over us, and we are fast adding to the roll of dead and wounded. Will it ever end? I hope for the best. Line of battle near Spotsylvania Courthouse, May 13th, 1864. Yesterday we had another fearful day of battle. Our regiment behaved splendidly, and we are spoken of in the highest terms. Early in the morning we heard a terrific fire of musketry and artillery at the front, and our corps was sent forward. It turned out that the 2nd Corps, under General Hancock, had charged the rebel works and taken their entire line with several thousand prisoners. As we passed up to the front, I saw 2 rebel generals as prisoners, Major General Edward Johnson and Brigadier General George H. Stewart. They were talking with General Wright and General Wheaton. I heard General Wheaton say, "How are you, Johnson?" And the reply was, "How are you, Frank?" They shook hands very cordially, having been comrades in the army before the rebellion. We did not go far before the bullets began to sing about us. The 2nd Corps was in the ditch of earthworks taken from the rebels in the morning. We, the 6th Corps, relieved the 2nd Corps, and they were sent to another part of the field. The rain began to fall, and soon we were deep in mud and water. While we remained in the ditch, we were sheltered from the enemy's fire, but if a head was shown above the works, bullets whistled immediately. On the right of our line, the works formed an angle, and our regiment found itself enfiladed by the enemy. Soon the horses and gunners of a battery posted in the angle were killed or disabled, and the enemy charged with loud yells upon the guns. They came so near that they dropped a rebel flag over into the ditch on our side, and as we opened fire, they fled and left it there. One of our own batteries, stationed on a hill in rear of our line, fired 2 shots which fell short and killed 2 of the 2nd Rhode Island. One of these men was named Graves, and he had just returned from a rebel prison. I was sent back to inform Colonel Oliver Edwards, 37th Massachusetts Volunteers, who had assumed command of the brigade, of the fact. I found the colonel and asked him to have the battery cease firing. He said that his staff were absent and asked me to ride over to the battery with the message. As my horse had been left in the rear for safety, I mounted an orderly's horse, a great lumbering beast. As I reached a hill, I was obliged to follow the ridge for several hundred yards. The rebel sharpshooters opened fire upon me, and I tried to spur the horse into a run, but not succeeding, I threw myself upon the offside and held on by the horse's mane. In this way, only my left leg was exposed. I lost my hat off, and as it was a new one and cost me $7.50, I drew my saber and ran the point through the hat and recovered it. I next lost my Navy revolver, but if it had been made of gold, studded with diamonds, I would not have stopped for it. I reached the battery and found the men lying upon the ground to escape the fire. I requested the captain to elevate his guns, and after they had fired a round from each, and I saw that the shots went over our line, I returned to the regiment, running the gauntlet of rebel sharpshooters again. In front of our line there was an open plain for perhaps 200 yards, and then there were thick woods. The rebels formed in the woods and then sent forward a small party with a white flag. As we saw the flag, we ceased firing, and the officers jumped upon the parapet, but as the party approached, they were followed by a line of battle who rushed upon us with yells. Our men quickly recovered from the surprise and gave them a volley, which sent them flying to the woods. From the woods, a steady fire was kept up until after midnight. The guns which I mentioned above were still standing idle in the angle, and neither party could get them. A brigade of Jersey troops were brought up and attempted to enter the angle, but were driven back. General Sickles' old brigade, the Excelsior, were then brought up, but the men could not stand the terrible fire, and instead of advancing in line, only formed a semicircle about the guns. Captain John P. Shaw of Company K, 2nd Rhode Island Volunteers, was standing upon a stump and waving his sword, to encourage these men when he suddenly fell backwards. I shouted to Major Jenks that Shaw was down. I ran to him and found him lying with his head upon an ammunition box. I raised him up, and the blood spurted from the wound in his breast, and he was dead. As I had lost my pistol, I took his and placed it in my holster, and will, if I live, send it home to the captain's father. Lieutenant Colonel S. B. M. Red was wounded in the neck and ear and left the field, and Major Henry C. Jenks took command of the regiment. I took a position in the rifle pit, and the boys would load their guns and pass them to me to fire. I had just raised the gun for another shot when a bullet hit me in the breast, tore a piece from my coat, but glanced upon my pocketbook and then struck me a glancing blow upon the right arm. I thought my arm was gone and hastily stripped, only to find a slight flesh wound. On the 5th instant, I was hit by a bullet that took the skin from my right forefinger. We were very anxious to get possession of the rebel flag, which was so near and yet so far. I called for volunteers to go with me and get it. Thomas Parker, a private of Company D, and several others came forward and offered to go, but before we could start, Major Jenks came over and forbade what he called a foolish adventure. We expended all of our cartridges, and when a new supply arrived, the officers broke open the covers and distributed the ammunition to the men. During the day and night, the average number of cartridges issued to each man was nearly 300. Many of them, however, were wet by the rain. Just before dark, the rebels made a desperate attempt to retake their works, but we drove them back. And so the fight went on and continued until nearly 2 o'clock in the morning, this morning the 13th. We took many prisoners during the day, men who, in the charges that the enemy made, could not get away. I never saw, even at Gettysburg, so many dead rebels as lay in front of our lines. I laid down to sleep about 3 o'clock this morning, but did not rest much, for the wounded were all about us. As we were well protected by the earthworks, our loss was not heavy, yet we had 12 killed and 21 wounded. General Wheaton complimented me upon my conduct in the fight, and my name has been mentioned in an order issued by the brigade commander. I thank God for his goodness to me, and am glad that I have been able to do a little service to my country. May 14th, 1864. Today we were relieved at daylight by other troops, and we formed in rear of the 9th Corps. Here we remained until towards night, when we moved to the left and formed in line 2 miles from Spotsylvania Courthouse. Our battery and the rebel guns have made a great noise today, but very little has been accomplished. Sunday, May 15th, 1864. We have today finished the rifle pits that we began last night. It has been very quiet, as if out of respect for the day. May 16th, 1864. Still in entrenchments, keeping watch and ward. Artillery firing is kept up by both sides, but little real fighting has been done today. Line of battle near Spotsylvania Courthouse, May 17th, 1864. We have had no fighting for 4 days, and both armies are building earthworks. So far, we have been successful, but at a terrible sacrifice of men. Our division has lost about half its number. We had about 9,000 men when we left Camp Sedgwick. On the 12th instant, the rebel dead were in heaps in front of our lines, and at one time the 2nd Rhode Island had 150 prisoners. I am well and happy, and feel that at last the Army of the Potomac is doing good work. Grant is a fighter and is bound to win. May God help him to end the war. We hope to see Richmond soon and humble the pride of the men who brought on this wicked war. Line of battle near Spotsylvania Courthouse, May 19th, 1864. Still fighting and digging. Our regiment is very much reduced, and we have only 9 line officers, company officers, left on duty. Yesterday, the old 6th Corps had a grand fight. We started in line of battle before daylight and marched through the woods and brush towards the enemy. At daylight we came in sight of their line of forts and made a charge, but it was of no use, for their artillery cut our men down in heaps. We reached the glacis in front of the rebel forts, and here we were obliged to lie exposed to their fire. Lieutenant Edmund F. Prentice was severely wounded by a piece of shell which struck him in the groin. He had just been hit with a spent grape shot that struck him in the temple. I was near him and sent him to the rear on a stretcher. We sent our men back to the wood a few at a time until all were out of the direct fire. As I entered the woods, I met Major George Clendenin, assistant adjutant on General Wheaton's staff. He had his servant with him and invited me to take breakfast, which I did under fire. We had some hot bread and a broiled shad, which someone had caught in one of the streams. Notwithstanding the rebel shells, I enjoyed my breakfast. We are now building earthworks about 500 yards in front of the enemy. It is hot work, but the men are fast covering themselves. There will be sad hearts in Rhode Island when the news reaches home. We have had very little sleep for the past 2 weeks, and no one pretends to take off his boots. But I can stand it as long as the rebels can, for we know we are causing them considerable trouble. Line of battle near Spotsylvania Courthouse, May 20th, 1864. A mail arrived today, the first in several days. I received 18 letters as my share. We have finished our earthworks and now feel secure. Our works are strong and built of large trees covered with earth. Let the rebels try to take them if they want to. May 21st, 1864. We remained in our rifle pits until dark, when we withdrew and started towards Richmond again on the Bowling Green Road. Sunday, May 22nd, 1864. We marched nearly all last night but made slow progress. Today we passed Guiney's Station and, after making a few more miles, formed in line for the night. May 23rd, 1864. Today we continued our march and in a short time reached the North Anna River. We could hear the firing in our front and on the south side of the river, but as our corps now seems to be in the rear, we did not do any fighting. May 24th, 1864, before daylight we crossed the North Anna River and formed line near the 5th Corps. Here we built a line of rifle pits and rested for the night. Line of battle near Knowles Station, May 25th, 1864. We have got out of the wilderness and are now near Hanover Junction and only 25 miles from Richmond. May 26th, 1864. Nothing of importance today. Still digging Virginia sand and making forts. At dark, we recrossed the North Anna River and marched to within a short distance of the Pamunkey River, our old friend of 1862. May 27th, 1864. We arrived in camp about daylight and received rations. Here we were allowed to rest. The Pamunkey is near. May 28th, 1864. We started early and crossed the Pamunkey River and marched to the vicinity of Hanover Town, where we were set to work building entrenchments. Great is the shovel and spade. Well, I would as soon dig the rebels out as to fight them. May 29th, 1864, we left our works sometime about noon and marched to Peake's Station, where we found a part of our 6th Corps tearing up the railroad. We formed in line to defend them from the rebels should they appear. Tearing up railroads is an old trick of ours. The rebel lines are in sight of us, but we hope to make them move on again soon. Our troops are at work destroying the railroad. The rebels have retreated before us for the past few days, but now seem to be waiting for our attack. I am well and happy, but very weary, having been in the saddle constantly for several days. Peake's Station, 15 miles from Richmond, May 30th, 1864. Our column is resting for a short time at this place. The rebels have retreated to the vicinity of Richmond. We are tired and hungry, as no rations have been seen for 2 days. 48 hours is a long time to go without food of any kind, but we expect rations tonight. May 31st, 1864. We are nearly 7 miles from Mechanicsville and about 15 miles from Richmond. Our advance to Peaks Station proved to be merely a reconnaissance, and at 3 o'clock in the afternoon we retired. Just before we retired, I was sitting on my horse in rear of the regiment when I saw across the fields 2 bright spots in the woods. I knew at once that there were 2 brass cannon there looking towards us. Just then, a surgeon of the English army who was with us, watching the course of the war, rode up and said, "Lieutenant, is there anything interesting to be seen here?" I replied, "Just wait a moment, Doctor, and you will see something interesting." Just then, both guns were fired, and the shells went screaming over our heads. The doctor turned and rode off, saying, "I will go to the hospital and see what is going on there." The boys shouted, "Is it interesting, Doctor?" I did not blame him, for he had no business to be at the front. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, we started to retire, and our brigade, with a main battery, was ordered to guard the rear of the column. As soon as our pickets were withdrawn, a body of rebel cavalry with a light battery attacked us, but we drove them back. We halted several times, and our battery opened upon them. They shelled us until nearly dark, when we reached this place and rejoined the army. Our regiment is now on picket duty, and I am riding as I sit on a gate under an apple tree. I have just had a good feast of ripe cherries. Last night our rations came up, and our 2 days' fast was ended. We have had much rain, and the roads are in a horrible condition. We are so weary that even when marching at night, the men will go to sleep. One night last week I dismounted to rest and immediately went to sleep. Someone woke me up and said the regiment had moved on. My horse was missing, and I followed on until I found her feeding by the roadside. Part of the 2nd Rhode Island will go home in a few days, but as I have agreed to stay, I shall remain. We do not know yet what will be done with the veterans. If the regiment is broken up, I have a promise of a staff position on the brigade staff. The month of May has ended, and the 2nd Rhode Island has found it one of sorrow. We have lost, since leaving our winter quarters, Captain Joseph McIntyre and Captain John P. Shaw killed, Lieutenant Colonel S.B.M. Redd, Chaplain John D. Buglas, Captain John G. Beveridge, Lieutenant Charles A. Waldron, Lieutenant Aaron Clark, Lieutenant Edmund F. Prentice, and Lieutenant Patrick Lyons wounded, besides nearly 100 enlisted men killed and wounded. Surely war is a cruel business, and what sorrow will be felt in Rhode Island when the sad news reaches our friends. June 1st, 1864. This morning our corps started at an early hour and had a hard march to Cold Harbor, where we arrived this afternoon. We were here in 1862 under McClellan, and some of the scenes are familiar. On arriving, we formed in line of battle in the rear and in support of the Vermont Brigade. Artillery firing was kept up by both sides until dark, and then we went at our old trade of digging sand. Quite a respectable line of earthworks was made, and we lay down behind them for a little rest. Our brigade just missed a share in the assault that our corps made just before dark. We were formed in 2 lines, the 10th and 37th Massachusetts in the first line, and the 2nd Rhode Island and 7th Massachusetts in the second line. Just as the line was ready to move forward, a force of rebels with a battery appeared on our left flank and opened fire. General Thomas H. Neal, now in command of our division, rode up and ordered our brigade to move to the left and protect the threatened flank. As we left the line, the 2nd Connecticut Heavy Artillery, a regiment 2 years old but without active service, having been on duty in Washington, took our place. This regiment numbered more men than our entire brigade, and in their charge they lost their colonel, Kellogg, and a large number of officers and men. Our brigade charged front and advanced on the enemy and drove them from our flank. When we returned, we found that the battle was ended, and but for the artillery, all was quiet. Cold Harbor, June 2nd, 1864. This morning some troops from the 2nd Corps relieved us, and we moved to a new position on the right, where we relieved some troops of the 18th Corps. Here we covered ourselves with rifle pits and spent the day. Sharpshooters have been at work all day, and it has been anything but pleasant. This afternoon we had a heavy rainstorm that seemed to dampen the ardor of both armies. We slept under fire of the enemy. Friday, June 3, 1864. We have had a terrible battle today, and the killed and wounded number in the thousands. For some reason, perhaps because so many men go home tomorrow, the 2nd Rhode Island has been kept in the reserve. We saw the whole fight and only lost 2 men. Nothing seems to have been gained by the attack today, except, it may be, that it settles the question of whether the enemy's line can be carried by direct assault or not. At any rate, General Grant means to hold on, and I know that he will win in the end. June 4, 1864. We have remained quiet all day in our entrenchments, with artillery and picket firing going on constantly. As the men who have not re-enlisted will go home tomorrow, we have passed the day preparing to say goodbye. Many letters have been written by those who are to remain and given to those who are to go home and deliver. I suppose the officers who are to leave us are happy, but I am glad to remain. Cold Harbor, Virginia, June 5, 1864. 3 years have passed away since I first enlisted. It seems a long time as I look back. If I had not agreed to remain in the service, I should now be as wild with joy as those who are to go home. But I am happy and do not feel envious at all. For if God spares my life, I am determined to see the end of the rebellion. I cannot complain of my treatment since I enlisted. I have been a private, a corporal, sergeant major, 2nd lieutenant, and adjutant. And if everything works well, I shall climb higher. It is not ambition that keeps me in the army, however, for I trust I have higher and better motives for serving my country. Wagon Park, 6th Corps, near Cold Harbor, Virginia, June 6, 1864. Today we have said goodbye to our friends who return home. 265 men under command of Major Henry C. Jenks left tonight and are now on their way to Rhode Island. 326 men whose time has not expired or who have not re-enlisted are left in the field. Captain Henry H. Young, 1st Lieutenant and Adjutant Elisha H. Rhodes, Assistant Surgeon William F. Smith, 2nd Lieutenant Thorndike J. Smith, and 2nd Lieutenant Samuel B. Russell remain with them. 1st Lieutenant Edmund F. Prentice is also on the rolls but is absent, wounded. Captain Young is on staff duty at brigade headquarters, and this leaves me senior officer and in command of the regiment. We have 150 men present for duty, and the balance are on detail or sick in hospitals. I have been offered a staff position, but if Captain Young is to remain absent, I prefer to command the regiment. The responsibility will be great, and as I am but 22 years of age, the authorities may think me too young. But with God's help, I shall try to do my duty by the men. Since the 1st of June, the 2nd Rhode Island has lost, killed, and wounded 25 men. There is some talk of detailing the 2nd Rhode Island as provost guard at Corps headquarters. I hope this will be done, but cannot tell, for we never yet had any safe duty to perform. We expect to go to the front tonight or tomorrow morning. Officers who return to Rhode Island on June 6, 1864. Lieutenant Stephen West, Captain John R. Waterhouse. Below, right, Lieutenant Henry K. Southwick. Veterans Den, Underground, Cold Harbor, Virginia, June 7, 1864. This morning, we are back in the trenches, and I am no longer the adjutant, but the commanding officer. General Wright, commanding the 6th Corps, says I shall have command of the regiment and has directed me to reorganize it for future service. For the present, I have made 2 companies with Lieutenant Smith in command of one and Lieutenant Russell the other. My Sergeant Major, George T. Easterbrooks, is acting as adjutant. I have just issued my first order, General Order No. 1, assuming command and giving some advice to the men. Sergeants are acting as lieutenants, and it will be several days before we can get our promotions. I have already been recommended by the general officers of the brigade and division for the captaincy. We are in a large sandy field covered with forts and entrenchments. The men have burrowed underground to protect themselves from shells, which the rebels throw from mortars. Every few minutes a shell comes screaming over, and then we run to our holes. It is amusing as well as dangerous. We are covered with dirt, but still, I am happy. It appears now as if we were to make a regular siege of the enemy's works. Tomorrow we are to go into the front line for 24 hours tour of duty. June 8, 1864, front line, Cold Harbor, Virginia. We are taking our turn at the front, and the rebel line is only about 200 yards from us. The men are well protected by bomb-proofs. Constant firing of musketry and artillery is kept up by both sides. Today we had a flag of truce sent into our line to bury the dead. This gave us a chance to get out of our holes and look at the rebel works. They appear to be very strong. The rebels who came with the flag were good-natured and ready to talk with us. June 9, 1864. At 2 o'clock this morning, the 2nd Rhode Island was relieved from the trenches by a Massachusetts regiment, and we are now a few hundred yards in the rear. I had rather be in the front, for here we catch most of the shells fired at the first line, but we are well sheltered. The weather is very hot and dusty, and as the men are obliged to stay in line and not move about, life is irksome. When we send for water, the details have to run the gauntlet of the rebel fire, and it is anything but pleasant. June 10, 1864. I have recommended 2nd Lieutenant Thorndike J. Smith to be promoted to 1st Lieutenant and shall make him adjutant of the regiment as soon as I can get some officers. I have recommended Sergeant Major George T. Easterbrooks and one other sergeant to be 2nd Lieutenants and shall promote from the ranks as fast as possible. I saw Captain William B. Rhodes of Battery E, Rhode Island Artillery, and Captain George H. Rhodes of the Cavalry today. What a strange scene meets the eye on every side. Forts on the plains and in the woods, constant roar of artillery and bursting of shells. Even as I write, I saw one poor fellow shot down as he left his shelter. May God forgive the men who brought about this war. I fear that I shall yet hate them. Headquarters, 2nd Rhode Island Volunteers, near Charles City Courthouse, Virginia, June 14, 1864. When will wonders cease? 36 hours ago, the Army of the Potomac was within 9 miles of Richmond, and now we are 40 miles distant. Sunday night, June 12th, we left our works at Cold Harbor under cover of the darkness and took the road toward the James River. We marched all night and all day Monday the 13th, crossing the Chickahominy River at Jones Bridge about dark. Here we encamped, tired and sleepy. I became so sleepy that I could not ride my horse and so walked to keep awake. This morning at 4 o'clock we started again, and we are now near Charles City and about 3 miles from the James River. The men are used up by the intense heat and fatigue of the past week. As soon as my tent was pitched, I lay down and slept for 4 hours. It is said that we are to cross the James River and attack Richmond from the south side. Either side suits me if we can only win. James River, near Brandon, Virginia, June 16, 1864. This morning we left Charles City and marched to this place on the James. Our corps is in line along the riverbank. We are enjoying the scene very much. My shelter tent is within a few feet of the river, and I have been lying in the shade all day, watching the gunboats and transports pass up and down the river. The river is about half a mile wide, and a pontoon bridge has been laid. The wagon trains are passing over the bridge, while some of the troops are crossing in steamers. The 5th Corps is now crossing, and we expect to take our turn tomorrow. We have enjoyed a good bath in the river, and the men are washing their clothes, having been deprived of this privilege for a long time. One of the darky servants has never seen a river before and called it a right smart brook. While watching a steamboat sail by, he said, "Does dat dar wheel turn on de ground?" He also asked how they got dot boat out of the water nights. We have had much fun with him. This morning we heard heavy firing up the river from General Butler's lines. I suppose we shall attack Petersburg or Fort Darling next. The 7th Massachusetts Regiment left our brigade yesterday for home, their time having expired. Near Petersburg, Virginia, June 17, 1864. Last night we crossed the pontoon bridge over the James River to Windmill Point and marched all night, halting this morning a short time for breakfast. We then continued on and made about 25 miles to this point, which is about 3 miles from the city of Petersburg. Here we ran against the enemy's line of forts and went into line of battle for the night. June 19, 1864. Yesterday morning we found that the rebels had abandoned their first line of works, and we took possession. In the morning I had some rifle practice at the rebels in a line of works in our front. About noon I was standing with Lieutenant Thorndike J. Smith on a little knoll in rear of our works, when we saw his father, who was a private in the regiment and acting as postmaster, coming across the plain in our rear. Our cook, carrying some pork, hard bread, and coffee, was with him, and as the bullets whistled past his head, he would duck and dodge. I was laughing at his strange antics when Lieutenant Smith asked me to tell his father not to come to the front again until dark. Before I could reply, I heard a thud and saw Lieutenant Smith falling. I caught him in my arms and called for a stretcher. He was shot through the back, the bullet penetrating his lung. I sent him to the hospital, and we fear he will die. He is a fine fellow and a brave man, and is to me like my own brother. I pray God that his life may be spared." His father dropped the letters on the ground and went to the rear with his wounded son. The bullet has since been taken out of Lieutenant Smith's breast, having passed through his body. At 4 o'clock in the afternoon, our division was ordered to charge, and leaving the shelter of our works, we rushed across the plain for the second line. But we could not take them, though we did succeed in holding a new line halfway between the two, which our men are now fortifying. The 2nd Rhode Island behaved splendidly, and I am very proud of them. We lost 7 men. A division of colored soldiers charged over the same ground, but were driven back. They fought well and left many dead on the field. During the night, the rebels fired into my regiment from a railroad cut on my left flank, but after some confusion, we drove them back. Half of the men stood in arms, while the other half slept a little. It was a hard night for us. Even as I write, the bullets are whistling over my head, but my men have scooped out a place in the sand for me, and I write in some degree of safety. I have not been much in favor of colored soldiers, but yesterday's work convinced me that they will fight. So hurrah for the colored troops. Shot and shell, canister and bullets, all the time. Petersburg is only about 2 miles away, but yet it is afar off. Lieutenant Thorndike J. Smith. That concludes the 10th part of the story. Thank you very much for listening. Please subscribe for more episodes and leave a comment.